Welcome to the show. Last year, 2 out of every 3 students in Washington County schools failed a standardized English and mathematics exams. Here to talk with us about these scores and what is being done to improve them, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Boyd Michael, Superintendent of the Washington County Public School System. Dr. Michael, it's a pleasure to call you Dr. Michael.
Well, thank you.
And after all these years, to watch you follow in the footsteps of your dad and what he meant to this community as a whole and to education and membership on the school board, welcome to the FlipSide.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
So if you could maybe address the question that was just brought up. I feel it's somewhat of an unfair question, but it's what was in the paper.
Right. Well, it's a fair question. I mean, recently the state released their PARCC data, and basically 2 out of 3 children did fail the PARCC exam in math and English. Math and English exams are given 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then we also give a required one in 10th grade, and there's an option for 9th and 11th grade in English Language Arts, and an option one for geometry and algebra 2, algebra being a required one. We're not pleased with the results that we received. This is the 3rd year for giving the PARCC exams in Washington County, and obviously we have a lot of work to do.
So the question that I had around these exams, 2 actually. Number 1, has the exam changed, or is this the standard exam that's always been given? And number 2, how do our results compare to other counties in the state?
So this is the 3rd year of giving this exam.
Okay.
So it's not new. It's fairly new in exam terms. Sometimes, exams only run 8 or 10 years, kind of run their course, and then there's a new, national standard of some type changes and exams change. It's a very difficult exam. It requires a lot more thinking on the part of students. Very different than exams in the past that have been much more about information. So we taught students information, they repeated that information on tests or exams like the math and English exam, or in the case of math, students would have rows of problems that they would solve. These are very difficult thinking exams is how I would describe them. So kind of the old word problems that we had in mathematics when I was a student, kind of that times 10 is what the math looks like. It's not rows of problems, it's you're given 6 and 8 numbers and a narrative, and you need to pull out the right information to come up with the right information. The English Language Arts part, very much a reading, writing type test, but not just simple text. It's complex text where you really have to think about what you're reading and then do something with it. And I think the tests, right or wrong, the nature of the test or the type of the test, I've never seen the perfect test. I think it's the type of skills that students are going to have as they enter the workforce of the future. Information is right at our fingertips on our phone. Students, employees will have, tons, myriad of amount of information at their fingertips. What do you do with that information? I think employers in the future are going to look more and more to students or their employees. Take information, make sense out of it, make meaning out of it, and make something that's making me a profit if I'm an employer. And that's very different than the workforce that we were preparing 20 years ago.
Yeah. Colin, what do you think? You're into having employees work for you. What do you think with what Dr. Michael says and how this whole thing is happening?
I guess the questions that I would have, and it's very difficult because I know in the past there's been, and I think personally, standardized tests are important in terms of gauging where the student population is. And I guess my question would be kind of threefold. One, is there a point of diminishing returns when we're dealing with standardized tests where we end up teaching to them more so than focusing on the curriculum that we should be focusing with the kids? And I'm not saying that there is or there isn't. I'm just wondering if that's something that comes into play. The second, I guess, would be how did we fare compared to other counties in Maryland or across the board if it's a national test? As sometimes you can have a test that is so difficult that you will have a very high failure rate, which is not indicative of anything other than it may potentially be above the capability of some of the kids, and that's fine. In other countries, you kind of separate kids out at a fairly early age, whether they're going into the trades or whether they're going into math science. We don't really do that here, so we clump everybody together. And I guess to some degree, I'm glad to hear that it is something more than just a repetitive test that it can be taught to. But I think the most important there would be to realize, or would be to understand how we fared compared to other places. I know the paper sometimes will take a headline and make a huge stink, but it may not be. We could find out that the entire country fared exactly the same, so that doesn't make us any better or worse.
So on September 12th, one thing we want to do is make sure we're providing accurate information to our parents and to our students and the community. We're going to show our ranking compared to other counties on September 12th during our board meeting. We definitely did not meet the state average, and we were below the state average. So that's certainly not a position where we want to be. Our past success on various types of tests, whether it was MSBAP, MSA, we have a whole variety of initialisms for all these tests. We've generally, outperformed the state average, and sometimes well outperformed the state average. And I think that's real credit to our teaching workforce, and that's where I want to see us return. I think the nature of this test, I don't think you could actually teach or prep for the test in the sense of, again, it's not an information test. There's not like a limited amount of information that you could prep kids on and then they would regurgitate that on the test. This, again, is a thinking test. So as we teach children to think, I can't see any harm in that. That's not teaching to a test. And to take complex information, whether it be mathematical information or a science of some type, or social studies, or English language arts literature of some type, and make meaning of that. It's not something you can teach to. It's a skill, though, you do learn. Again, we're trying to teach children to think.
So this sounds like an important piece of the total puzzle, looking at how we educate our students. What other data points do you base the curriculum and where Washington County goes from an educational standpoint? What other data points do you use to inform that decision?
Well, a variety of other data points. I think one of the most important things, as you bring that up, Jim, is that the PARCC data is but one data point. So we do want to look at a variety of data points as we look at the success of our county. We have many successes in Washington County. PARCC will be a success in the near future. I'm confident it will be. Our AP results, we've come the last 10 years, from very few number of students taking advanced placement courses to many children taking advanced placement and many more children passing advanced placement courses. So we're very proud of that. Our SAT scores are solid. The SAT went through another revision, another change. So we're kind of waiting for some Maryland national average on that in order to compare ourselves to that. But we have a lot of certification programs that our students are doing very well in. A lot of other achievement, a lot of other contests that kids participate in, and just a lot of other things that are very much a success story in Washington County. So PARCC, again, is just one measure, and I don't want to overemphasize that it's an important one. But our teachers just do an outstanding job, and they've worked extremely hard in a lot of areas beyond PARCC data.
Let me ask you, it seems like every time a new superintendent comes in, something new comes up. Back years ago, we had the state of Maryland was one of the top school systems in the country, and Washington County was one of the top in the state of Maryland. Then we changed superintendents, and the superintendent there had to go on to do different things, got all involved in something else, to technology and that type of thing. And now you come in, and all at once, out comes a report from the state. It seems like they do this every couple years. Why would you react to one test to change the way teachers teach and the way the curriculum is done? Why would that happen in the state of Maryland?
Well, for Washington County, I don't think we're reacting, immediately just with me being superintendent. I would say we're looking at that data. Again, back to this thinking test. I'm very passionate about preparing students for the future. And I'm very concerned if we continue on the path that we're on right now, that while we'll share information with students, while students will have basic skills, they might be employable for a few years, but they won't be employable for the next 10 or 20, or as a child graduates, it's 18, I believe they're going to be working for 50 years yet. The life is going to change a lot over 50 years, especially as we look at employment. For that pre-K child that just walked in the door, they're 60, 70 years away before they end their employment. So, you know, I'm passionate about helping them and preparing them. I'm not passionate about passing the test. I'm passionate
Okay.
about helping them think for the future. And I'm very excited. We have a workforce that this summer has really joined in on a lot of professional development. There seems to be a renewed energy and the urgency of trying to help kids prepare for their future, not prepare kids to pass the test.
Okay, Colin, what, as a follow-up to what Dr. Michael is saying?
Well, I think that the interesting part, and I think this is something that you've referred to a number of times, is part of the issue that we have had for such a long time, and I'm not saying necessarily in Washington County, but in general, an entrenched way of teaching that maybe isn't taking into account this new thinking, this problem solving, this ability to prepare for it. So maybe it is an opportunity more so than it is a challenge to kind of re-examine how we're teaching kids and how to make them successful.
I think that's a good way to look at it. You know, I think for educators, often, you know, our whole life has been school. You know, we went to school, we, you know, worked some part-time jobs, we went to college, we came out of college, went back into teaching, and the realization of how much the workforce has changed or is changing, I don't think we realize. But again, I do want to credit our teachers. They have really stepped up this summer. I see a lot of people interested in what it's going to take to help young people learn to be great thinkers in the future and contribute to their employer's work.
What is the process to change the curriculum to make these kind of shifts, paradigm shifts or otherwise, in the teaching methodology? What does that process look like in Washington County schools?
Well, it's not easy. Teaching children is very difficult. It's very much a science, and it's very much a challenge, especially when you look at the needs of every child being a little bit different. The curriculum work has been done, and actually this past year was the first year the full curriculum's been in place. So we're entering our second year of the curriculum being in place, so that's going to be helpful to teachers. But we spent a lot of time this summer, particularly looking at reading and mathematics, as how we can approach this differently. And I think just a lot of aha moments from teachers, but now they realize some things that they really need to do. Some of our workshops, again, teachers walked out and they were just, you know, just energized that they saw things and realized things that maybe they'd been doing for many years, that they can help children differently by just making a few adjustments. So I'm very excited about that part.
Very good. Thank you so much. Up next, we will continue our conversation with Dr. Michael. We're back in 3 minutes.